We're recording this Zoom chat because we want to preserve this interview in the college archives. And before we do that, we do want to articulate some of what, we're going to send you a formal form, a release form that will basically indicate whether or not you're comfortable with us preserving either the video or the audio or both for the college archives. That
depends
ever.
on how I do.
Okay. So I'll send that to you after. That's just a formality. But we are recording this, if that's all right with you.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, and for more formality, I'm kind of required to read this bit at the beginning here. So the recording of this interview will be made, and a transcription will be added to the Davidson College archives. These materials will be made available for research by scholars, for scholarly publication, and for other related research purposes consistent with Davidson's mission and regulated according to any restrictions placed on their use by the interviewee or interviewer. The names of the interviewers are Severine Steer and Dahlia Kritkovich. The name of the narrator is Frank Goldsmith. The location of the interview, we're in Davidson. Are you in Asheville, sir?
Well, technically I'm in Fairview, which is just outside of Asheville. It's a rural community in Buncombe County, just outside of Asheville.
Fair enough.
The
date is March 7th, 2019. The purpose of this interview is to preserve the testimonials of Jewish students or Jewish alumni of Davidson College. And I'm going to ask for your oral consent for this to be recorded.
I consent.
Wonderful. Okay, great. So now we can start. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
I'm happy to do that.
Good. Well, yeah, it means so much to us. We're on spring break right now, so we're trying to get a lot of these completed, and it's been really fun meeting people via video chat.
Are you on campus, by the way?
We are.
Okay. Yeah, and I see the Davidson colors on your...
Oh, yeah. I purposely dressed up for this interview.
I didn't know.
And I wear my red jacket that you can't really see.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm drinking coffee from a Brown University mug here.
We'll have to forgive you.
It's where my son teaches. That's why I got it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair. Okay, so just to start things off, where were you, I guess, how did you learn about Davidson? Where are you originally from? And what was your relationship with Judaism like before you arrived here?
Okay, well, that's a number of questions.
Yeah, sorry, that was a lot.
I grew up in Marion, which is a small town. It's the county seat of McDowell County. It's not far from Asheville. I don't know if you know where Marion is, but it's McDowell County. So that's where I grew up. I had an uncle who attended Davidson, and I think that's why my interest was piqued in attending Davidson. And so I decided to apply and got in. And the other schools I applied to were the Citadel, so I was infinitely happier at Davidson than I think I would have been at the Citadel, and also UNC. And I thought Davidson offered a superior education, most likely. So that's why I decided to go there. And I guess I learned about the school probably from my uncle, or my father learned about it from him, and they decided that that's where I should go. So in terms of Judaism, the interesting thing is I was not then Jewish. I may have mentioned this in an email to someone, but I'm a Jew by choice. I had done a lot of reading about religions. I had gone through this odyssey in high school of, becoming an atheist after I read Bertrand Russell's Why I'm Not a Christian, which was an influential book. And I read a book by Gordon W. Allport, who was a sociologist back then, it was called The Nature of Prejudice. And then I began just reading about religions, and I read about a lot of them. The one that resonated with me the most was Judaism. I grew up in a small town, where there was only one other Jewish kid in high school. Well, I shouldn't say other. I was not one of them at that point, but Steve Goldstein. He became a lawyer and practiced in Asheville, although he's retired now. And he was the seat ahead of me in the high school band. We both played cornet, and he was really good. And so there was not a huge Jewish community or a lot of ways to learn firsthand, experientially about Judaism. I went to temple one time in high school with another friend from Old Fort, which is an even smaller community here. But in the reading, by the time I got to Davidson, my thoughts had gelled so much that apparently I was identified. I must have self-identified as Jewish when I went to Davidson, because I don't know how else Davidson would have known to contact me with this project and identify me as one of the people who was Jewish during his first year at Davidson. I do remember that my nickname, Davidson then, I don't know how it is now, we had 12 fraternities, and 90-some% of the students were in fraternities. It was all male. This was in 1963 when I went there. And my nickname in my fraternity was Rabbi. And I think
God, wait, whoa. Sorry.
It was sort of jocular. It was maybe in a teasing way, because my interest in and affiliation with Judaism was well known enough so that that's how I was known to some people. And the other day I had occasion to be going through a bunch of memorabilia in my office attic down in Marion. I left that law firm, and I'm still going through stuff and trying to sort out things. And I found this trove of letters from an English pen pal that I got when I was in the 6th grade, Mavis, and her name then was Harrison, now it's Warner. And I found a letter she had written to me at my Davidson P.O. box in 1964. So I don't remember the month. It would either have been in the second half of my freshman year or my sophomore year, beginning of that, addressed to, quote, Rabbi Frank Goldsmith, P.O. Box 973, Davidson, NC. And I say that only because it's some evidence that indeed I did identify with Judaism when I came to Davidson. But, there really were no more Jewish students then at Davidson than there had been in high school. I remember Arnie Goodstein from Charleston was a year ahead of me. I honestly cannot remember anyone else who was Jewish at that time. And so there was no Jewish presence on campus. Nobody really to relate to about it. So that's how things were. And to sort of accelerate a little bit, I spent my junior year in France, in Montpellier, France, and I joined l'Union des étudiants juifs de Montpellier, the Jewish Student Union of Montpellier, and I worked on a French-speaking kibbutz the year after that in the Negev in Israel.
Oh, wow.
It was a phenomenal experience. So, that's as much connection with Judaism as I then had, and we can continue. I mean, after you ask questions, but I can tell you more about that odyssey if you're interested in it later on.
Yeah. So the reason I had that reaction was because part of our project is also going through all of the Davidsonians and reading about basically just reading every Davidsonian and trying to look for instances of Jewish life or mentions of Jews or what have you. There's an Around the Frat column, I think, where K.A. wrote about Rabbi, and I wasn't sure what that was, but
K.A.
nice
wrote about Rabbi?
Yeah.
Wait,
I think
was this from the year?
It might have been SAE, actually. I don't know. It must
so I was in Sigma Nu. So I was not in KA or SAE, and I have no idea.
I'll look back at that. I might be
curious.
misremembering, but I do remember someone being referred to as Rabbi. And I remember taking a note of that and thinking, I can't imagine this is good, but I'm glad it's a nickname rather than...
If it was in the period from 63 to 67, I don't know anybody else who was identified as Rabbi.
Yeah.
Other than yourself.
Beside me.
Huh.
It's kind of ironic because I've gone on to become a Torah reader and a leader of services and president of the synagogue. And so I'm sometimes, in kidding I'm in an organization called Carolina Jews for Justice,
Yep.
social justice organization. And I sometimes we're asked to give a reflection at the beginning of a meeting, and I pull something out of Jewish text, and so they call me the rabbi for that, but I'm by no means a rabbi.
Yeah, of course. Well, nonetheless, reverence.
Oh gosh.
Well, a lot of our questions have to do with.
We
have
plenty of questions, but
nonetheless, I was just wondering if you could just establish kind of like a timeline for us. So, would you say that your kind of like religious exploration really came into view late in high school, or?
I think even probably by my sophomore year in high school, I had early on decided that Christianity was not for me, and I just could not accept theologically a lot of its premises, and so that led me to do all this reading, and I read about other religions as well. I read about Unitarianism that seemed to be fairly neutral about some of the things I was concerned about. There were other motivations. I mean, I dated a Catholic girl for a while I was at Davidson, and so I would attend Mass, but I never really participated. That did not resonate with me. So I think my focus on Judaism really was established by late high school, I say, as a product of just exploration and reading.
And the years you were at Davidson were 63 to 67?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, graduated in 67. And there were some little intriguing connections with the family. I mean, I don't know that I have any familial connection with Judaism, but among the books that we retrieved from my grandmother's house, who's really an adopted grandmother, but was a cousin of my mother, there was a book in Hebrew, and that always fascinated me. Later, when I began to be able to read Hebrew, I discovered it was a New Testament written in Hebrew, which is really odd.
Wow.
And my surmise is that it may have been used as a vehicle for conversion, for seeking to convert people to Christianity by putting the Christian scripture in a language that would be recognized as holy and authentic and so on, and not the original Greek. It seems to me a pretty misguided idea, if that's what it was. But I don't know if my mother's family, was on the receiving end or the converting end. I have no idea about that. And I asked her, and she had no idea why that book was in the family. So, but it was. I still have it on my shelf here, from the late 1800s, printed in London.
That's wild.
That is wild. You started this religious exploration so early on in high school. Were you worried about coming to Davidson, since at the time it really and continues to have in the present such a connection to the Presbyterian faith? And did that at all, I guess, influence your decision? Were you worried about being able to explore your Jewish identity here?
No, I don't think that really entered my mind, to tell you the truth, because it was such a nascent, undeveloped attraction to Judaism. I at that point had been to temple one time in my life.
Okay.
I certainly was not observant or practicing at all. And so I think I was just, I came out of Marion High School. It's a small high school. Not many people went to Davidson. I think I was flattered to be able to be admitted and go to Davidson. So I don't think I was very concerned about that aspect of it. I mean, there were other reasons why I felt like I may or may not fit in. I was already sort of a liberal, if you will, and progressive kind of person. And Davidson was a pretty conservative place back then.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
I know you're astounded to hear that.
When you said the Citadel, I was just thinking about the compulsory ROTC service, but
well, we had that.
Yeah.
And this was during the Vietnam War, so virtually everyone, I mean, you had to take the first 2 years of ROTC, and virtually everyone elected to take advanced, as they call it, ROTC, and get a commission, because otherwise you were going to be a private. And so I did that as well.
And I'm fairly certain mandatory Vesper services were abolished by this time, but by the time you came to Davidson, that is. Do you remember if that was the case? Yeah.
They actually were abolished during my time at Davidson.
Oh, really?
So when I first went there, first 2 years, we had mandatory Vespers, and daytime chapel. You had to attend church. I suppose a synagogue would have qualified had there been one anywhere near around. There certainly were some in Charlotte, but it was like class. You got a certain number of cuts if you didn't go to church. And I'm not sure. I don't remember quite how we may have just pledged that we had gone to a service and that counted, or whether you had to get some sort of document, but you were allowed a certain number of absences from that. So it was, it was very strict in that regard. It was very Presbyterian. You could not possess alcohol on campus. I remember there was a guy who he was driving back onto campus with his fraternity brother right beside him, who I think was on the honor court, or maybe not. But they stopped suddenly. A bottle rolled out from under the seat. The fraternity brother felt obliged to turn him in, and the guy didn't graduate with his class. I mean, it was that strict. So I spent my junior year in France, as I said. By the time I came back, it had all changed. And a lot of, Vespers had been abolished, the mandatory aspect of it, and the mandatory church attendance and those sorts of things. But I also remember how the students rebelled against some of that by, for example, when you had to go to Vespers, they would wear T-shirts and shorts, and they said you got to wear a tie. So they would loop a tie around their T-shirt, or they would hold up a newspaper and read it. I mean, there were just these little ways of rebelling against this enforced Christian conformity that we were subjected to. And I don't think that was necessary on my senior year by the time I came back.
But your time in France was almost formative in your Jewish identity. I know Montpellier has a pretty robust Jewish community. I wonder so by the time you came back from France, were you more serious about thinking about practicing or identifying actively as Jewish? And was that possible at Davidson?
It wasn't really possible at Davidson then. I certainly was more engaged. This whole evolution was a gradual process during all of my more youthful years, I suppose, until I became adult and finally decided that I wanted to formally convert, because I felt that I was something of an imposter before. I was not really Jewish. I hadn't gone through a conversion experience. So when I'd been in this Jewish organization in Montpellier. I'd worked on this kibbutz and really wanted to make Aliyah. I thought I would come back and finish at Davidson, and I would probably come back, to Israel. It was a wonderful experience working on the kibbutz that summer and traveling around Israel. And so all of that certainly had a positive influence in my engagement with Judaism. It even affected my choice of branch in the Army, because when it came time to graduate from Davidson and get a commission, most people chose non-combatant branches like the Quartermaster Corps or the Adjutant General Corps or military intelligence or whatever. And I chose the infantry, and I asked to be sent to the Desert Warfare Training Center at Fort Irwin, California, because I thought there would be a war in the Middle East. And of course there was, the summer I graduated, 1967. But it was over so quickly that I thought the U.S. would be involved, and it was not. And that's a good thing. But at the time, I was so committed to, even to the point of wanting to fight for Israel, even if it were in the armed forces of my country.
Wow.
So that's basically it.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
I would love to ask you more questions about your personal experience. We're just limited by the scope of this project and thinking about Davidson as an institution.
Fire away, whatever you want.
Was Max Pauli employed by around your time?
Was Max Pauli? Yes.
Yeah. Were there?
I love Max Pauli. He was a wonderful professor.
Yeah, we hear incredible stories about him.
We've heard great things.
Were there people on campus that could help you explore this identity? I mean, it was almost impossible to practice from what we've heard about being Jewish in the 60s and 70s, as far as like keeping Shabbat or even keeping Yom Kippur, keeping Passover, very difficult. But were there people on campus you could go to, like Max Pauli?
There really weren't. Max Pauli would have been a good person to go to, and I really liked him and had a good relationship with him. I don't recall that we talked so much about Judaism. There was a professor a younger professor whose name escapes me right now. But I have it on my shelf. I'm looking to see. He taught a sort of a non-credit course in Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, and I took it. And it was just an elective. I mean, and obviously everybody else in the class was going into the ministry, save me. But I took that. I had learned a bit of Hebrew when I was in Israel and wanted to pursue that. And so I talked with him, and he certainly knew that I was not headed for the ministry, and rather I was coming at it from a Jewish perspective. But I don't remember any conversations with any of the other religion faculty. I actually had more hours in religion. Davidson had such a strong department in religion that I found biblical studies particularly fascinating, and I had more hours in religion than I did in my minor. I had, more in my major, which was French. My minor was German, but I had more hours in religion because I just felt that it was such a fascinating topic, and it was so well taught at Davidson.
And this was during the period where religion, professors in religion were required to have, not an MDiv, but were required to have, be ordained, essentially, right?
I knew they had to be Presbyterian. I wasn't sure they had to be ordained. That doesn't surprise me at all. I know all the faculty had to be Presbyterian. I remember after I graduated, there was an issue with a Jewish professor who had been offered a position.
Yes, that we were going to ask about.
We were going to ask about the Linden affair.
You didn't even know about that.
Yeah.
So I wrote a blistering letter to Davidson.
Oh, you did.
One of my classmates resurrected and sent to me. I'd sort of forgotten about it. Just really taking them to task for how they wouldn't hire him or wouldn't provide him or wouldn't put him on a tenure track. I don't remember the issue.
Yeah.
If you're interested in that, I could send that.
Well, we'd love to see that. We're actually part of this project is we reached out to Dr. Linden, who is at Pittsburgh, and he's coming to campus next week.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So we brought the issue back to light a couple weeks ago in the Davidsonian, and explained kind of everything that went down in 77 and then concluded it by saying we're hosting Ron Linden here. We're going to do a formal oral history with him in person, and then we're doing a panel on institutional anti-Semitism with him and some other folks.
That is wonderful. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, we're really, really excited. We were going to ask you about the Linden affair. I'm curious to see what your letter, I want to see that.
Absolutely.
If you're willing to share.
Yeah, I can scan it and email it to you.
That would be incredible.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Do you remember how you heard about the Linden affair?
Yeah.
I don't know whether I heard about it from a classmate. I have a lot of good friends who were my classmates that we gather annually and have gone swamp canoeing for the last 30-some years, and they're a great bunch of folks. Most of them had become civil rights lawyers like I was, but some did other things, and it may have been one of those guys, because most of them are from Charlotte and are closer to Davidson and had heard about it, but somehow, I don't know if it was in the Charlotte Observer or I doubt Davidson itself sent out anything then.
I don't think they did. It was in the Washington Post and the New York Times.
Yeah.
So anyhow, somehow I heard about it, and maybe if I look back at the letter, that will reveal how I heard about it.
Yeah.
I told Davidson how I had heard about it, but I was pretty outraged about that. And I mentioned working with Carolina Jews for Justice now, and which is a fairly new organization. We were founded in 2013 in the Triangle, and the Asheville chapter was founded in early 2014. And one of our main focuses is anti-Semitism, and we do the economic justice, racial justice, the intersection between anti-Semitism and racism and white nationalism, all of those things. So I was pretty attuned to things of that nature. Oh, I have been, really.
Do you remember getting a response to your letter?
I don't remember getting a response. I think I may be able to find out whether I did or not. if I look where the letter is. I'm not sure they responded to me. Or it may have been some sort of, thank you for your views, we'll take them into consideration. I don't know, some meaningless,
Right.
I don't know. Honestly, don't know.
Interesting. I do want to know a little bit more about the surrounding town. Did you hear of people? I guess there weren't Jewish students here, but Jewish families in Davidson or in Charlotte. Did you have any contacts kind of in the broader Charlotte area while you were here at Davidson at all, or no?
None at all.
Okay.
Yeah. I was completely isolated, I felt.
Okay.
And I think I could have changed that. I probably could have reached out and searched for connections in Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there were any connections at Davidson. In fact, I was back there for my 50th reunion a couple of years ago. I was astounded to learn there was a Hillel at Davidson. I did not know that.
Yeah.
And, I talked with Carol Quillen, about some of this either at that reunion or maybe I was there for some other reason earlier. And she was quite, of course, welcoming and positive and hopeful that things had changed, because I described a little bit to her about how things had been back in the day with Jewish students.
And as an alum, had you heard of any other incidents of anti-Semitism at Davidson aside from Linden? And then we do want to talk about the recent unmasking of the neo-Nazis this past fall. Had you heard of any other incidents by word of mouth or?
I have not heard of them. Don't doubt that there have been things that have occurred, but I don't often go back to the campus. As I said, I went back for my 50th, and part of that was because, for whatever reason, they decided to give me the Distinguished Alumni Award.
Yeah, I read that. I wanted to say congrats.
So I enjoyed seeing my classmates, but I'm not a regular visitor to the campus.
Okay.
If I'm down that way, I may stop off and buy a new T-shirt or sweatshirt if I've worn the other one out. So I really don't know, and I need to be better informed about the more recent episode that you're talking about with the things on campus. One of my Charlotte friends did tell me about that, but I don't know the details about that. I would be interested to know.
Yeah, we can touch on that later.
Towards the end. Sorry, I jumped to that.
Okay.
But, just kind of getting back to what it was like being a student at Davidson who, even though you were not super sure of identifying as Jewish, or you weren't identifying as Jewish, at least not Presbyterian, were there other students on campus who were maybe not questioning their faith, but going through a kind of similar experience at the very least?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I mean, I clearly was, I was not only rejecting being Presbyterian, but being Christian at all. I just, I pretty clearly, definitely clearly decided that was not for me. And I think having done the reading I had done before getting to Davidson prepared me somewhat for what freshmen were taught in Bible class when they got there. Because I think a lot of Davidson students, at least at that time, came to Davidson fairly naive about religion and fairly certain of their beliefs from a pretty conservative Christian point of view, at least theologically and maybe politically as well. And I know that for a lot of my classmates, they were really shaken by what they learned in the religion classes about, the strands of authorship of the Bible and, some of the contradictions and just the historical biblical scholarship approach was new to them. And I think undermined for some of them their foundations in faith. And for me, that certainly was not the case. I really relished all of that learning and embraced it and found it fascinating. But I think it's because I for better or worse, not intentionally, but I prepared myself for that by the reading that I had done. So I think there were a lot of students who were questioning their faith. I think that's probably not unusual when one goes to college. I think there are a lot of changes that take place. I don't know of anyone else who specifically became interested in Judaism, or I think there were some who became agnostic or atheist, but I don't know of anyone else. I would love to have found them who turned towards Judaism.
Did you feel like your experience paralleled? So you said you dated a Catholic girl. Did you feel like your experience, paralleled her experience in some ways? I feel like we've talked to some Catholic, even professors here who say to us, "Oh, like I was seen as a pagan when I came to Davidson."
Yeah, my friend is somebody I had known from this area. And truth, I think that's an accurate comparison. There were just about as few Catholics in the town I grew up in as there were Jews, and there are very biased attitudes towards Roman Catholics, or there were at least at the time I grew up, and I think probably still are. So I don't know that that's something she and I ever really discussed, and it was not. I mean, it was several months. I dated her, and then I think she have been happy as a nun, and I didn't see much of a future in continuing to date her. So anyhow, I think that's an apt situation. One of my very good friends in high school was Catholic, and he was picked on, and I kind of took up for him and befriended him, and he has never forgotten that. I mean, to this day, he lives in California, but he reminds me that he saw me as a friend when a lot of others did not approach him.
I mean, that kind of builds into my next question, which is, how did you feel like your non-Jewish peers understood or imagined Judaism at the time at Davidson?
I don't think they had much of a clue. I think, and mind you, I was not a really good font of knowledge for them either at that point. I was still learning.
Right.
At that time, I really didn't know Hebrew. I didn't know much about ritual observance or practice. I didn't attend synagogue. So I've evolved a lot and learned a lot. And I think my peers did not know much about Judaism at all. And I think that's why, when they call me rabbi, it was a little bit teasing. It wasn't pejorative, but it was joking and teasing. Like, isn't that kind of odd? Frank is interested in Judaism. Let's call him rabbi.
And we spoke about Vespers. Were there other religious traditions, or even broader structures that were present at Davidson while you were here that were kind of ingrained in the everyday, or even within fraternity life?
I don't think so much in fraternity life. It was more modeled after a Roman orgy or something. That's not really true. I mean, Davidson you couldn't have alcohol, and there were no women, so
right.
What could you do? But I don't know that it was a particularly religious atmosphere in the fraternities. Christianity clearly, Davidson was imbued with it, and in the religion classes, I think there was an assumption that when they talked about the Old Testament, and it was pointing towards the New Testament, and certainly even among these professors that I so much admired, who were brilliant men, they were all men. There was still that Christian take on things, even though it was done with a very scholarly view. And then you had the church being pretty prominent on campus, and the services and the Vespers, and there was a daytime chapel, as I said, an assembly, and it seems like it wasn't always a religious theme, but periodically there would be some religious component to that, to these mandatory assemblies we went to.
Right. People saying prayers before meetings, praising Jesus, that seems to be kind of just baked into the everyday experience of Davidson.
It was probably so common that I didn't take note of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
That makes sense.
I have no doubt that things like that grated on me in some sense. I didn't think it was right, but what am I going to do? I'm at Davidson, it's a Presbyterian school, and I'm not going to change that by myself.
Just to be very explicit, and this is a question we ask everyone. I guess we have to alter it a little bit. To what effect did you, see anti-Semitism in the town, or at the college, or in the surrounding town? If it was just kind of offhand jokes or somebody saying something, it was a very different time as far as Jews in America goes. And I'm sure that Davidson being what it was back then, nobody had really interacted with Jews, unless they were from Charleston or Atlanta.
Yeah, I don't have any specific memory of anti-Semitic incidents while I was there. And part of that may be because there were no Jews, and there was hardly any point into saying something anti-Semitic because, who are they going to be talking about when they do that? Probably if I were able just to turn back the clock and replay everything, something would strike me as being that kind of comment. But I don't recall hearing anything in the town or in the surrounding area or on campus at that time that I remember, at least. In part, this is a long time ago, over 50 years ago, so my memory could be flawed as well.
Sorry, we're just checking things.
We are checking things off. It's your story is so different than so many others because again, this was Jewish life here was so different, non-existent, and you weren't formally Jewish, so but it's still so valuable.
The funny thing is, you're also not the first person we've heard of who converted or began exploring Judaism after leaving Davidson. We've caught wind of another alum who kind of had a similar experience.
Right? Yes.
Yeah. So it's something, something to dig into at the very least.
For a while I was thinking, well, I must be the only Davidson alumnus who's become president of a synagogue and a Torah reader and a service leader and all of that. But I'm sure that's not true now. I mean, there must be a lot. There must be a number of others who have pursued Judaism, become more involved with it, and more engaged with the observance, the synagogue life after that.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's more true of recent generations, like the last 5 or 6 years of Jewish students who have gone on to become cohort leaders of organizations like JFREG. I don't know if you've heard of them in New York, or join, in Boston. I mean, I feel like
their former executive director is on the board of directors of Carolina Jews for Justice, Dov Kent. I don't know.
There you go.
Dov Kent, but so I know JFREG.
Yeah, and I think in the next 10 years we'll begin to see a really robust, diverse Jewish population at Davidson that has frankly never existed before. But right now we're kind of teetering in this liminal space of being a presence on campus, but not being kind of not having come into our own just yet. We don't have 100 Jewish students on campus, but we'll probably get there in the next 2 to 3 years.
So how many do you think you have?
We know we have 99.
We're not yet at 100, but yes, we're in the 90s.
And I mean, counting liberally, as far as the college is concerned, that is who is Jewish. And I'm not sure if all of those people would consider themselves Jewish or practicing or religiously Jewish, maybe culturally Jewish. I mean, there are just so many ways to cut it. As far as the chaplain's office is concerned, there are 99 Jews on campus.
But in terms of Hillel and the people who come to events, it's a solid 30.
30
to 40, which is nice.
That's not bad.
Not bad.
And is there any, I know that there's now a synagogue on Lake Norman, which there did not used to be. Is there much interaction? I think it's reformed. Is there much interaction with the campus and the synagogue?
I think there will be soon. They're experiencing some staff shakeups now that I think will lend themselves well to kind of knitting together the two communities. But yeah, there are students who teach at the Sunday school and they host their High Holy Days in Chambers and
the Lily Gallery.
I would definitely say that the rabbi is someone that we talk to sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think their support, as we've been talking to more alums, it's clear that there was a huge shift in Jewish life as soon as Kol Tikva came. And it was almost instrumental in making sure that a more formalized Jewish kind of life began to emerge at Davidson.
We also heard with Rob Spock coming, he was our current chaplain. He brought about a lot of change as well, and he's been super supportive to both Dolly and I and the Hillel group at large. Given that we do have a relationship with the rabbi, but
Rob has been
instrumental. Yeah.
That's great.
And also, there was an anonymous donor who has funded a trip to Poland and England for the next 4 years now that Dolly and I were able to go on last spring break. So we visited some concentration camps and kind of juxtaposed that visit with more contemporary life in London, which was awesome. and I never thought that would be part of my Davidson experience. So there are some really great parts.
I remember when the year I was in France, I hitchhiked into Germany, and I went to Dachau. And this is like only 20 years after the war had ended, so it was it was an interesting experience. That's the only former camp I was able to get to. That's great. It sounds like things are growing and thriving at Davidson, and that's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
When I was there for many, many years was Will Terry. I don't know if you.
Yeah, we know who Will Terry is.
Yeah, and I got along fine with Will Terry. I don't know that he had any particular interest in religious diversity, but he was a, I think he tried his best to to be a friend to the students and a counselor to them in different ways.
Do you think if you went to him and said, I'm thinking about all of these Jewish things, he would say to you, that's lovely, like, you go for it, or here's the name of a rabbi in Charlotte, or just like, I don't know how to help you?
I that's a good question, and unfortunately I can't ask it of Will because I think he passed away a year ago, but it may have been the third that I don't know how to help you with that. I don't know. I don't want to underestimate him. He may have had ideas, but I'll bet nobody came to him and asked him that. Because I don't know who would have at that point.
May have been some closeted Jews.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think, and this is just kind of this is going to be a very vague question, but thinking about your own Judaism and Tikkun Olam, and even a passion for social justice, do you think Davidson instilled that in you? Because I feel like something we talk about a lot at Davidson now is humane values and essentially like putting good back into the world. And there are a lot of Jewish alums who are very concerned with working with organizations like JFRED or Join and understanding their Judaism as a means to social justice. Do you think Davidson had a hand in that, or was that something that you kind of independently came to through your own religious education?
I think if it would have been a pretty tangential influence, if there was one. I already came to Davidson, as I've said, having read about prejudice and that sort of thing, and I was pretty much on the path towards liberalism, and was a lot more progressive than I think almost all of my contemporaries there. I don't know if you have heard about Students for a Democratic Society back in the 60s.
Oh,
SDS.
yes. Oh, cool.
So we didn't have SDS in the South. What we had in the South was the Southern Student Organizing Committee, SOC. And I formed a chapter of SOC at Davidson. I was one of the co-founders, and SOC was designed to be sort of provocative. Its button, its emblem, was a Confederate flag with a black and white hand crossed over it, like that. And we did things like picket textile mills, where workers were on strike, or support the civil rights movement and things like that. So I don't think any of that involvement in social justice issues was instigated in me by being at Davidson. In fact, I think Davidson, for the most part, was not at all very enthusiastic about its students participating in things like that. So, on the other hand, I do think Davidson teaches a certain moral compass that's very strong. I think the honor system is real and was a good influence. I think there is a lot of ethical teaching that goes on there, and certainly in the religion department and elsewhere. And I think the culture of the campus is an ethical sort of culture from my experience there, stressing honesty and doing the right thing. And so I don't think that was intended to lead us into a path of social justice and tikkun olam by any means. Not that they would have even known what that meant necessarily. It is part of my values. I can't deny that.
Certainly.
And formation of my character, I'd say.
Yeah. What year did you found the Southern Student Organizing Committee? Just to get the timeline down.
Yeah, 1960. It was my senior year, so I think it was 1966 after I got back from France.
Mm-hmm.
That's my recollection of it.
Did you live in France after graduating?
What's that?
Did you live in France after graduating?
I did not. No. I went to law school. I thought I was going to go in the Army. I got a delay to go to law school at Chapel Hill, and then I went in the Army on active duty for a couple of years. So I never got back. I mean, I've been to France to visit. I'm hoping to go again because my son's going to be working over there this summer and taking his family to Orléans. So I can't resist going to visit him. But I never returned to live overseas after that.
This is another. I don't actually know the dates he worked at Davidson. Was Alan Singerman employed at Davidson during your time there in the French department?
No, I don't think so. We had Joe Embry and Walter Meeks and Professor who's from Valdez. It's a Waldensian name. I can't remember his name. Anyhow, there were maybe 4 French professors, but not him. So
he was one of the first Jewish professors tenured at Davidson, which is why I asked.
Yeah.
Is that right? Well, that had to have been long after my time.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess so.
Of course, but I wasn't sure if he was kind of floating around.
Yeah, no. Not at all. Especially being a French major, I would have loved that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That would have been great. What else?
I guess we can get into the Twitter Nazis now.
Tell me about that.
Where do you even begin? About 2 weeks after the Pittsburgh shooting, do you know what? So, Socialist Collective in Shelby, North Carolina, tweeted at the college saying that they had basically matched 2 Nazi Twitter feeds to 2 Twitter feeds of students who went to Davidson. That's called doxing, essentially when you reveal the identity of someone who is affiliated with kind of fascist politics. And so they tweeted at the college, and it was picked up by a couple of students. Coincidentally enough, I was walking to a Hillel. We were at a Hillel meeting when this happened. So there was a group of 12 Jewish students meeting in a room in Chambers, and I got a call from a friend of mine who said, "Have you seen these tweets?" And one of the students, who was a senior and a physics major, I believe, basically had become radicalized during her time at Davidson, probably by her boyfriend, who also was a student here. And her tweets were essentially things like just unrepeatable kind of
really
anti-Semitic,
racist, anti-immigrant, really just
everything you name it. Yeah.
And
so radicalized in a right-wing way, I take it.
Yes.
She arrived here completely.
Well, people believe her to have been kind of, I think one student put it, a garden variety liberal, Hillary sticker on her laptop, kind of nice girl. She was from the town of Davidson.
Her family's from the town. Her family has been from Davidson for quite some time.
Both of her parents went here.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of people knew of her, and then her name was leaked, her identity was leaked, and campus kind of went into this frenzy.
It was shocking. I mean, tweets like "gas the kikes." I don't know.
Images from the Pittsburgh shooting, even.
I don't know about the Pittsburgh shooting, but
no, I think there was.
Really?
Yeah. It was horrible. We were all in a room, like Dahlia said, in Chambers. President Quillen actually came to that meeting and said, do you guys want to stay at my house? I'm here for you, blah, blah. But it
was just deeply upsetting and
tumultuous.
There were questions of the school communicating with the student body, and at what point did they know what, and
questions of safety,
exactly,
and the removal of the students and off campus as well.
Yeah, under what circumstances were they not barred from returning to Davidson, or whether they were asked to leave or expelled, or whether it's even possible to be expelled from Davidson for tweeting things like "gas the kikes," essentially.
So what happened to that student, or was it just that student?
So it was that student and her partner, her significant other, her boyfriend. They were taken off campus that night that they were doxxed on Twitter. So they were taken off campus, and the school did communicate that to the students who
were the morning after.
So that was the whole thing. so a lot of students, including myself, felt unsafe, and so then we learned the next day that they were taken off campus, and they've not returned to Davidson since.
Wow, I wonder how her parents feel.
Well, right, especially since they have a relationship with the college. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And both, I don't know if both were in ROTC, but at least she was in ROTC. So people were tweeting at ROTC command saying, like, can you believe this? And yeah, I don't know.
How prevalent is ROTC now? I mean, is it? It's certainly not mandatory anymore, is it?
No, it exists. People, you see them on the cross-country trails running drills sometimes.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that they have a particularly strong presence on campus.
It was funny when I was there. You did it one semester and you were off the next semester, and so you marched around. And the semester you were off, people would get on the roof of Duke Dorm and throw acorns or something down on they would pelt the helmets of their classmates who were walking by. It was just a big lark, Nobody was terribly serious. Well, some people were. There was a guy who tried to form, I think, a sort of a special forces unit of ROTC on campus, which he was a bit of a nut.
Acorns and all.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Yeah, no, so we did want to mention the neo-Nazi presence. I'm glad we were able to talk about that, but just to see if you had heard about it and kind of what it was like to hear about it.
Yeah, I had heard about it, but not in that much detail.
Yeah.
And I think I had heard, in fact, there was a message that went out to the alumni network.
Yeah.
That puzzled me because it didn't give much background. And so I wasn't really clear what they were talking about, but sort of an apologetic message, but that they had dealt with or were dealing with the problem and all was well, I guess.
And that's what we were kind of getting as well.
Even though it did not feel like all was well.
No.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that and a lot of other things have kind of created an impetus for a push for Jewish studies at Davidson. So Dahlia and myself and a few others composed a petition that we sent out, I guess in early or late January. Now it feels like a bit ago, but we got over 1,000 signatures in support of this Jewish Studies program at Davidson. And a couple weeks ago, Davidson posted their first ever posting for a professor in Jewish Studies in the history department, a visiting professorship.
That's wonderful. 1,000 signatures out of whatever the enrollment now is. That's a significant.
Yeah, it was also alums and friends of the college.
Ron Linden signed the petition.
Ron Linden did sign the petition.
Well, a really good friend of mine is the retiring director of the Center for Jewish Studies at UNC Asheville. And they're engaged right now in a search for a new director who will also have to, they can't afford just to hire a director. So that person has to also be a professor in some department. Yeah. And the department, ironically, maybe, that is in need of a professor is the German department. So we've had these three German Jewish, I mean, they're not originally from Germany necessarily, but they're scholars in German, but also they are Jewish and a lot of their work has been in Jewish studies, and they've been giving lectures lately to people as part of that process. So we expect a decision to be announced, I think, pretty soon.
That's really exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, like, as we've been advocating for this, it was not just we published a petition, the school said yes.
No.
There was a lot of other stuff that went into it, too. But as we've been kind of engaging in this advocacy, it's also spurred us to kind of connect with other Jewish communities throughout North Carolina. So UNC Chapel Hill is actually one school that we've connected to. Elon,
Queens,
NC State. I mean, that kind of situation. And it's been really exciting.
Yeah. I think that's going to be a really good catalyst for, the vitality of the Jewish experience on campus.
100%.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a journey, but it's been really, really worthwhile.
Yeah. So, I mean, finishing up, who else should we talk to? Do you know of anybody else who would be interested in this project or who might have something to say?
Well, I mean, the only other Jewish student that I knew when I was there was Arnie Goodstein in Charleston. I have no idea what he is doing. He became, he was from a prominent family in Charleston. That's a really old community down there, the Jewish community in Charleston.
Yeah.
And Arnie became a state legislator. In fact, if you go around Charleston now, there's the Arnie Goodstein Freeway or something like that.
My.
Outskirts. So I have no idea how he could be reached. The alumni office may be able to help.
Okay.
But from my era, he's the only other person that I can think of. And he would have been in the class of 66.
Right.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great, yeah. And if you can think of anyone else over the next couple of weeks, let us know.
Yeah.
Non-Jewish too.
Right, including people who were there after I was there. If I can think of somebody.
Yeah. That is
I can,
helpful. That's great.
And I will remember, and if I appear to have forgotten, you can email me, but
I will
dig out my letter to Davidson about Professor Linden.
That would be fantastic. And we're going to record the panel with Lyndon next week. So I can send that over to you too.
If there's a link you could send, I'd love to see that.
Wonderful.
Yes, and we'll send you the final product for this project as well as just we'll update you as we can throughout the remainder of the semester. This is going to be an ongoing project. Again, there's so many people we want to talk to, not a lot of time.
So it's just the two of you doing this, or are there others involved?
Well, it feels like it's the two of us sometimes, but we've been doing a lot of the oral histories with Jewish alums, and it feels right because we're Jewish students here. We have a lot of other non-Jews in the independent study, which is really great. So some other folks are focusing more on the history, so digging into the Davidsonians and kind of creating a narrative about specific institutional structures and policies throughout time at Davidson, and then the oral history component and the Linden visit is part of it. So I believe there are 8 of us in the independent study, which is pretty great.
Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Good.
And before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like us to record for posterity?
I really can't think of anything.
That's
I would just say that increasingly, since I left Davidson, Judaism became a more and more important part of my life, and I can't overstate that. It's really been very significant to me. And, I've mentioned Carolina Jews for Justice. So I became a civil rights lawyer for the most part. I did employment discrimination and civil rights work and other kinds of law. And then on a separate track, religiously, I was Jewish and I was engaged with the synagogue. And what Carolina Jews for Justice has done is to meld those two aspects of my life. This passion for social justice and civil rights on the secular side with being able to do it using Jewish text and the many sources of inspiration for that we find in Jewish literature. So I'm as engaged or more as I ever have been in Judaism, and particularly in the social justice aspect of it. And I wish I could credit Davidson for planting that seed, but I don't think I honestly can. But it certainly, at least it didn't squash it out of me either.
That's true.
Sometimes that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Sometimes that's enough, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm so happy to hear that. I mean, I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, me too.
And
me too.
So actually those alums who are involved in JFREG and Join, as I was mentioning, are coming to campus in April to do an anti-Semitism training and to talk about actually the intersections of Judaism and social justice. I mean, as we're kind of entering a new moment politically, and a lot of people on the left are reassessing, again, where Jews fit in kind of the grand scheme of things, I feel like it's really important for, again, our peers who are involved in, essentially, this elemental struggle, or at least, some struggle for equity in this country, to come and talk about that. So if you want to come, or even if Hillel at Davidson is looking to do more. I
was going to say.
If Carolina Jews for Justice, the Asheville chapter, or even the chapter in the Triangle, has anything we could do, we would absolutely love to.
What we have a chapter in Charlotte. It's not a very strong chapter yet, and we're working on one in Greensboro. For a while, we had one in Wilmington, and the leadership kind of fell apart down there. So we're trying to expand. We have 2 organizers who are super. They're wonderful organizers that we just hired, back in September, October, I think. And I'm going to mention that. I would love to see some involvement of Davidson. I know that there's a new rabbi at Elon, and we've talked about bringing her, I believe it's a her, into, is it Sandra Lawson? Is that her name? I can't remember right now. And so I'd like to know about the April event down there.
Yeah.
My rabbi is involved with Join. He just got back from a training, I think, from Join. So when is that? In April? Do you know?
They're coming the weekend of April 11th. I'll check my calendar right now. We don't have a sense of exactly what they'll be doing because it's a month away and life changes, but
I think that may be the weekend of my Holy Swamp trip that I mentioned earlier.
No! The tradition.
I think we're going to be camping out on the Edisto River in South Carolina. I'm not sure about that. I need to check my calendar too, but
absolutely.
shoot, I would love to come down. But maybe there are other ways I can make connections with Hillel.
Oh, definitely.
We'd
Over
love
the coming
to.
years, please.
Yeah. I mean, after I'm here for another 2 years. Sev has less of a lifespan, but
hearing that is awesome.
We're really hoping the Jewish community at Davidson kind of becomes more public facing, not just like here in the college community, but just more widely. And I think making connections throughout the state is really important.
Yeah, and there has been recently an effort to create a Jewish alumni network.
Yes, which is how we got.
That's how we found you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they kind of linked us. It was perfect. They linked us up with I think it was Carrie.
We ought to be brainstorming ways we can support the students.
Yeah.
Be supported by the students to some extent. Ways we can interact. It's still very much in the formative stages, and I just filled out a little survey about it the other day. But that would be great.
Yeah, I'm so excited to hear that as I'm entering the real world.
Yeah, where are you headed after Davidson?
I'm unsure. I'd love to be I'm from New Jersey, so New York would be great. Or I'm interviewing somewhere in Chicago this weekend, so big cities I love. So we'll see.
Are you going to just take a job, or are you going to grad school, or?
I'd love to eventually go to grad school, but for the next 2 or 3 years, I'd like a job. And until then, I'm so burnt out right now.
Right.
But I'd love to pursue a degree, maybe in higher ed, down the line. So we'll see.
That's great.
Yeah.
What are your ambitions for after Davidson? I know you have 2 more years there, but
she has some time.
Yeah, I think
she has to go abroad first.
Yeah, I have to go abroad and never come back. I think I'll actually be in France. I'll be in Paris. I think the question is whether I'll apply for a fellowship and try and be abroad for longer. I think grad school is also in my future, and not just professional grad school. I think actually getting a PhD might be the plan, but we'll see. Other than that, I think it's just go with the flow. I've also kind of I'm from New York, so being Jewish in New York is kind of like having brown eyes. No one really cares. But coming to Davidson was really formative in that. Suddenly, I felt like this aspect of my identity, like my parents aren't American, I'm mixed race. Like I felt like I was thinking about a lot of aspects of my identity in New York, but being Jewish was not one of them. And then I came here and I thought, oh my God, there's so much work to be done. So the question is whether I'll pursue something Jewish, and it's looking like I will, after Davidson.
Great.
So so we'll see.
Well, I'm excited for both of you. This is great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was lovely.
Yeah, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Yeah, we really, really, really appreciate it.
I have enjoyed it. If you think of things you forgot to ask or you need more information, you know how to reach me. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. And I'll send over the permissions form after, this afternoon sometime. So.
Okay, that sounds great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.